What I'd like to do here is to just give you a basic flavour for some of the major differences that we're going to see in face rigging that are quite distinct from the challenges that we face in body rigging. Often, of course, when it comes to rigging, this is the sort of thing that we're used to, right? It's a whole body rig that, controls the character and moves them around and lets us twist and turn and, just pose them up in different ways, in this sort of a fashion. Of course, what we are dealing with a rig of this kind is a hierarchy of essentially just pivot points. It's just one joint after another that, turns this bit, that bit, etc. Irrespective of whether we're dealing with, an FK part or an IK part. It's just this hierarchical series of hinges, essentially. The body parts, the upper arm, the forearm, the upper leg, the lower leg, they're just these solid blocks that we have to rotate from a given point. And yes, we might, be wanting or needing to deal with things like, twist down the length of stuff. We might be needing to, work out how to best deal with, particular joints and hinges along the way. Smooth things out at certain areas like, of course, commonly shoulders and all of that stuff. And whilst there are lots of, little things and tricks that can be employed on a rig of any given description, it doesn't make much difference whether we're doing a humanoid or an insect or a digger. This basic idea of just a series of rods, if you will, connected together by hinge joints is the same pattern that we see over and over and over. Faces, however, are quite different. First of all, we have the fact that there is only one real moving joint in the face, and that, of course, is the jawbone. That's the only, actual hinge joint, skeletal joint that there is here to speak of. And there's no great hierarchy to it. You have the head, and then you have the jaw that is a child of it, and that's it. That is the hierarchy. It gets no more complex. At least not, in your standard humanoidish mammalian face. All the other stuff that we have going on here is just this skin-wrapped ball. It's almost like having a sock, if you imagine the opening of the mouth being the open end of the sock. And it's just got like a bowling ball stuffed inside of it. And the surface of that sock, the cloth that's draped over the ball, is just sliding around on top of it. Of course, we've got the muscles and their attachments, and they are pulling things along. And we have analogy to that, of course, in a body rig. The skeleton has got muscles strung across it, but all those muscles do when they pull, irrespective of any kind of, muscle simulation or, bulgy deformation. All they are doing is just turning the hinges at each point, at each rotation point. In the face, apart from that single rotation point of the jaw, we don't have any of that. These muscles are contracting and they're just pulling the cloth over the ball. Also, of course, they're all, interconnected and hook up different places for pulling parts in different directions, as we saw with the, zygomatic muscle that pulls the outer bit of the mouth one way, and then, of course, the levator labii that sort of pull it up another way, and they work together to pull it in a bit up and a bit out. It's an entirely different style of articulation. And not only that, of course, with a body rig, each part is its, own individual little thing, okay, so we, turn the hand or the wrist and we maybe get some, bit of deformation into the forearm to sort of simulate the forearm muscles flexing the hand, but all of these bits are, pretty much independent of one another, right? You bend the finger and it's not really having much effect over here on the nipple or something. And of course, neither would you expect it to. But in a face, when the jawbone goes and pulls, because of course the skin is wrapped around and underneath it, that tugs on the mouth, which naturally opens up, unless, we push a muscle to make the lips, force their way back together or something of that nature. What the lips and the mouth do, affect the whole cheek area, and of course how that all pulls. So the muscles that are operating the lip are, of course, pulling of the cheek skin. Of course, when we go into a smile, sort of a, position, then generally the muscles in the upper cheek here are all working, so that bulges, and we often tend to, get a little creasing along the under eyelid. When we're operating the brows, they don't just move up and down, they slide over the, circular, near spherical, whatever ball-like surface of the skull itself. It's not just good enough to deform up, you've got to deform around and over. And of course, when the one brow goes, it doesn't just go by itself. Because this is just a continuous stretched piece of skin over the forehead, it does have fall off and, drift into the opposing side, even if we're, doing a Mr. Spock one up, one down. There is this continuity of deformation that occurs across the entire area there. And of course, what happens in the brows up here has a fall-off effect into the eyelids. And so not only do we not have this standard, step-by-step branching hierarchy, we've also got the different shape and the kind of deformation that we have to produce. And we've also got a system who mechanically, if we do think in terms of, the muscles or what, part, section, area of the skin is getting pulled or pushed in which direction, we have this highly interconnected system where, actions in one bit of the rig are having to have fall-off effects into another bit of the rig and, pull and stretch things there, which also need to be independently controlled, but with that need to have fall-off effects back into the original part. It's a multi-directional, interdependent, non-hierarchical system with these curved surface-based deformations. And this really is the thing that sets facial rigging apart, and why, of course, many people find approaching this kind of rigging to be so troublesome so much of the time. And of course, why morphs and, similar methods like the combination shapes rig are so popular and easy to understand a method of constructing facial shapes. It's because so much of the stuff that we might have learned here doesn't really help us that much over here. I mean, sure, the basics of the rigging system, how to set a constraint, how to place a bone and a weight map, obviously enough, that stuff is still the same. But the engineering concepts into how we actually construct a hierarchy and lay out controllers and make them operate together, there's almost nothing from body rigging that translates easily to facial rigging. So with that in mind, it might be helpful before you proceed, with this training to have a think for yourselves about the different issues and think what you already know of rigging and how you might try and solve them in a facial rig, how you might address the specific requirements and the problems faced. And then, as we go on and move forward and get into the training, be ready to almost be starting from scratch in ideas about hierarchy construction, how we place controllers, the kind of little mechanisms that we will engineer out of the constraints, and how we design those and structure them in a way that best serves the needs of the motion and the mechanics and ultimately the animation of the faces themselves.